Hey guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again with the 16th episode of Poll Review, I believe. And sorry this took me so long to get out. Built my PC on Wednesday, didn't get it working until Sunday. I had work in between, so that sort of messed everything up. But I'm recording this now on my new computer. It's working great. It's really quiet, plays games really well. But let's just get into poll review. I do the daily poll on exclusively games, and every week, hopefully every week, I go through the last 7 daily polls, go through the results, why I did it, and the replies below. And without further ado, we're going to start off with daily poll 106. Has E3 ever convinced you to buy a game? And I obviously did this because it was like just after E3 had ended, or it was like around the time it was sort of wrapping up, or it was either wrapping up during it, sort of time. It was like E3 time was really relevant, and I figured I'd ask if anyone ever bought into the E3 hype, and 51% of you guys haven't bought into the hype. 16% have, which has been me a few times, and then E3. 16% of did for one time, one game, and then E3, and then the only other response is more than free, which is 32%. So it actually is pretty divided between people who have bought games due to E3 and people who haven't, but it's majority haven't of the very small sample size. But that is the poll and the results, and we'll get into the replies. We've got Dub Z, who says, if a game debuted at E3 and I liked what I saw, even if it didn't debut there, he'd love seeing more of it. From Dub Z. And this is one of the things that E3 is a very big show. You'll get a lot of bigger games shown at E3, and if you do like that initial showing, and then the game comes out, or it's no initial showing, and then you're like, oh, this will come out in a few years, and it comes out, and then you see the reviews and whatever, you buy it, and then I guess that is a sort of reason as to why E3 convinces people to buy games, because a lot of games that get announced at E3 don't don't come out to the consumer years after that initial showing. Spider-Man, Division 2 are two games that come to mind. Cyberpunk, Metroid Prime 4, definitely. But we'll move on to the next reply from Retro84. He says he doesn't really recall any. There are moments where a game that he was looking forward to was shown at E3, gets him more pumped up for it, but he just can't think of one E3 presentation that's convinced him to buy a game. Ultimately, there's always time in between E3 and the release of a game. Plans change, and what was shown as E3 may be quite different from the finished product. He knows that he's changed his mind between E3 and the release of a game. So, I think Retro brings up a good point. I mean, if you look at the original Watch Dogs, the game changed a lot from E3. Rainbow Six Siege, if that was shown at E3, changed a lot too. So, and the fact that a lot of E3 presentations are like these 15-minute gameplay demos or cinematic trailers that are very on rails, don't show you too much, but are supposed to get you the pre-order. So I think with Retro, he's probably got the best mindset about it. I'm sure there's a lot of people where they're like, well, I saw this game, sort of liked it, but then I saw it at launch or saw it at release. It wasn't what I saw at E3, so moving on. And I think that's how a lot of people feel about it these days. I mean, Anthem was a completely different game that was shown at E3 rather than what it ended up being at launch and afterwards. And I feel like a lot of people have more Anthems to point to than good games that actually were what they that turned out being what the developers said that they it turned out being the games the developers said that they are at launch at E3, if that makes any sense. But we'll move on to the next daily poll, which is 107, which is, do you think Cyberpunk 2077 will get a delay? And this was the was the week during E3 time. My apologies. And it was Microsoft's E3 conference was yesterday. CDPR was Cyberpunk's release date was unveiled. Keanu Reeves, you already know. I'm not going to get into that, but the release date was revealed. So I figured will it get a delay? Because this game's been in development so long. The Witcher 3 got a few delays, so I'm curious if you guys think it'll happen again. And it's a pretty divided, well, I would say there is a good amount of division between the results. So 19% think it will be, 51% think it won't be, 19% again I think there's enough information for them to decide, and then 9% don't care about Cyberpunk. So pretty spread out across the board. Most people don't think it won't be a delay, and thinking about it, they are really sure about this. It is a good amount of time. The game's been in development for 6 years at this point, I think 6 or so years, and then it's gotten it'll have around 5 of full production, where the entirety of CDPR has been working on it after Witcher 3 launch. So maybe 5 or 4 years, and then a couple of years of pre-production to sort of lay everything out. So this game's been in the oven for quite a while, and I think April 2020 is a very believable release date for the game. So but that's just what I think. What do you guys think? That's the Droid thinks that CDPR doesn't announce release dates lightly, so no, he doesn't think that it will. So I think that's a very good point. Witcher 3 was delayed a few weeks after its release date. I'm not sure if that was for any particular reason. That happened 4 years ago at this point, and I wasn't really in tune with CDPR way back then, so I couldn't say. But there's always a possibility some localization or something like that happens. But it is far enough off. They are far enough in development that I do think it will. I do think it will come out on the 16th of April in the year of 2020. We've got Gremlin Bandit, who doesn't think so. The game has had an awesome trajectory with announcement news and whatnot since 2018. Looks like it'll come together in a neat little package by release. In other words, he'd be very surprised and disappointed if the game was delayed. And do you agree with that, essentially? It's basically what I've been saying. But there wasn't much disagreement, too much of it being delayed, just the possibility exists, because that could always happen, and that's really about it. But the way they've got the standard, the collector's editions unveiled, they had this huge show at E3. They've got another demo to show off, and they're going to show that to the general public at PAX West in about 2 months from now. So they are basically going into that final stretch of building up hype, as they say. So I think they are very much going to be able to hit that release date. But we'll move on to Daily Poll 108. Is the Final Fantasy VII Remake still episodic? And this was from Square's show at E3, and they showed the Final Fantasy VII Remake, a good more bit of gameplay. They showed Tifa. I haven't played Final Fantasy VII, the original, but I think it looks pretty good. I think Tifa looks fine. I think all the characters look pretty good. The graphics are really nice and everything. But I'm very confused. It's still going to be episodic, and it's still going to be episodic from what I know. But at the time, it was still so they didn't really mention anything about it. So 47% of you guys think it will be episodic. 4%, one person thinks it wasn't be. 17% say there is enough information for them to decide, and then 30% don't care about Final Fantasy VII. And I think it's going to be confirmed. I think it's been confirmed for it to be episodic because of just how it works. So I don't know, but in March of 2020, we'll see how it all pans out. Hopeless Wombat says he thinks they're using the term episodic when they really mean something more lines of expansion. He imagines the overworld's going to be a sadistic effort based on the detail they're showing for Midgar alone. However, that's assuming there is an overworld. As much as he thinks doing the entire overworld would be a pain in the ass to make, they did make Final Fantasy 15, which makes me think they've got enough ability for that. Take out the overworld, and perhaps the episodic becomes the right term for this. He doesn't know. I guess we'll see next year. So we'll read the next comment, and then Musata says, unless they simply stop after the first part. Yes, the first part ends with the departure from Midgar, and I think if Musata say it makes a good point, but it's just so confusing with this game. It's been in development for years. We saw it at E3 2015, and then it's a completely different game now, essentially. But Square is like they're saying like enough, but like not enough at the same time, which is really confusing. Like they're saying a lot about like Final Fantasy VII, revealing a lot of details, they're showing a good amount of gameplay, but there's also like I don't know. There's just this whole uncertainty about like the exact details of the game that are pretty important. Like if this game is going to be episodic, like when's the next episode coming out? Do you have like a release date for it? Which is really confusing because if we get to, like the first part of this remake, right, and there's a whole half or 2/3 of the game that we still need to play, like how long is it going to take for them to develop that? I mean, I imagine a lot of the work that they've gotten from the first part, if there's going to be 2 more parts to it, we'll say, can be reused. Assets, and music, and the battle system. Like that's a lot of work that doesn't need to be done for the other stuff. But you'll still have to make like new environments and do a whole bunch more voice acting and yada yada yada. So I'm just very confused. So, and I'm staying far away from the remake until I'm not as confused. And I think I'm only not going to be confused when the game hits the market and I see, people who've played the original play the remake and then telling me what the content is, essentially. But we'll move on to the 109th daily poll, which is when do you think Breath of the Wild 2 came out? So Nintendo, the day before this one, Nintendo did their E3 Direct. It was really good. I think a lot of people think it was pretty good, but I'm a big Nintendo fan, so I think it's pretty good that take what I say about Nintendo with a grain of salt because I'm a massive, essentially fanboy of them. But Nintendo does do stuff wrong. Willing to call that out, obviously. But for all our faults, I love Nintendo, and I really like their show. But that aside, I just, they closed the show with Breath of the Wild 2, and I'm very excited for it. We don't know really anything about it other than like this 1.5-minute teaser that Nintendo showed us for the game. So I figured I'd ask you guys, when will we get to play this? And 2 people say 2020, which is 6%, 41% say 2021, which is when I think, 10% say 2022, 6% say 2023, 6% again say there isn't enough information for them to decide, then 27% don't care about Breath of the Wild 2. So it'll probably be something different, but that's what we're calling it for now. And we'll move on to the replies. We've got Balta666 who says 2021 sounds about right to him, as it doesn't have to be built from scratch. You hear people saying 2020, but that sounds like wishful thinking. Yeah, I agree with Balta, but I'll get into my thoughts after I read the next comment from Majestic Boer Goat, who says 2022, that will give him a solid 3 years to develop and polish it. Gets worried when dev teams get less than 3 years to make a game. So I think I know. This is all speculation, so this could be entirely wrong. But I think I know the development cycle for Breath of the Wild 2. So, Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. That was March 3rd of 2017. And I think after that, they had like a team, like the Zelda team at Nintendo who makes the Zelda games. They had like one team make the DLC. That could have been like most of Nintendo. And then they had one team essentially to do some pre-production on a sequel, because it could have been like, oh, what we're going to do for the DLC, and then they're like, they had a lot of ideas. It's like, okay, there's too much to do. We'll make a sequel to the game, so we'll get a team to like explore what a sequel will be, and like start building the basics of that, and then we'll get the rest of the team to make the DLC that we've decided on making. So they make the DLC. It comes out by the end of 2017, early 2018. The entire Zelda team goes and they start making it. So around January 2018 to, let's say, holiday of 2021. So that would be a good solid 3 years, if that's what I'm thinking of. So they've got a good 3 years and a couple of months in pre-production. And considering that they've got a lot of this game will remain in terms of assets and everything, and the world, they can just sort of storyboard things out and say like this is the sort of location. So I do think that is the production cycle for this game. I could be entirely wrong. It could have started production in 2018, just full stop, like everything, and there wasn't the whole team was working on the DLC, but that or whatever. So I don't know the inner workings of Nintendo, but it is my personal thought process of why I think holiday 2021 will be Breath of the Wild 2's release date. But we're going to move on to Daily Poll 110, which is rate E3 from 1 to 5. And this was close to the end of E3. You know, we had basically seen every show that was important, essentially, in terms of, like, you know, what we'll be playing, you know, this year and a little bit into the next. And most people said 3 at 51%, 8% said 2, 5% said 1, 8% said 4, and then 2% said 5, and then 24% don't care or haven't watched E3. So, so I gave it a 3. Nintendo's really bumped it up. Everyone else was pretty lackluster. Square's show was pretty good. If you're like a Final Fantasy fan and like a Final Fantasy fan, it was really, really good, but I'm not that big into Final Fantasy. The whole collection of mana being localized, that's a really cool thing. I know a lot of people wanted that, but other than Square's, pretty decent showing, and Nintendo's really good showing, I think most of what was shown at E3, EA, Bethesda, Ubisoft was pretty bad, like, definitely below average, for the rest of those guys, other than Square and Nintendo, from what I think. But that's just me. So that's why it's basically a 3. It's like, it would have been a 2 without Nintendo, but Nintendo bumps it up to a 3. That's how I see it. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Tomologen thinks, why would he waste his time watching hype, spin, lies, and trailers of games, where most of the game was also in last year's E3. Also waits for people to cover and condense E3 down in one or few videos to see if there was anything of interest. Big surprise, E3 this year was another waste of time. And I think there's a good amount of the gaming community because of it. Because the E3 is just it's a lot of lies and smoke and mirrors and marketing hype, essentially. But I don't know. I had the time to watch the presentation, so I did. I had a little, entertainment from them. But, like, most of the stuff, especially, like, basically everything from Ubisoft, I'm not touching. Bethesda's, I did pre-order Doom Eternal. But I love the 2016 Doom. It was a really good game, and that collector's edition looks like it'll be pretty cool. Helmet's probably going to not be the best quality, but it'll be a nice prop, essentially, and I can make a video on it, so that's why I'm pre-ordering it, essentially, and the game will be fun, too. That's important. Hardcore Gamer says 2 out of 5. Most of the games they showed were games we already knew about. Too many cinematic trailers, not enough gameplay. This is what I have to agree with. Not enough gameplay. They'll never show enough gameplay, Hardcore Gamer, because they don't want to. They don't want to. A cinematic trailer is shorter, it's flashier, and it gets more people to pre-order. Since it looks, it looks more polished and more like something worth buying than like some janky gameplay of the game that's not going to be that good. So that's why they don't show too much gameplay. But we're going to go to Daily Poll 111, which is how much do you think Project Scarlet will cost? And Project Scarlet was talked about at Microsoft's E3, so I figured I'd ask you guys what you think it'll cost based on like what we know about, which isn't too much. So we've got 22% saying there isn't enough information for them to decide. We've got 11% saying Scarlet will cost $400. Pretty free. A third say Scarlet will cost $500, and then another third say it will cost $600. So that's those are the results, how they fall. And we'll go in the replies. Twidget says, I don't know what it might cost, but I'm guessing between $400 or $500 US, enough for a nice upgrade for his PC. So yeah, I think Twidget's got it right on the money with the Scarlet. Scarlet's essentially just a PC. So if the Scarlet's at a certain amount, you might as well just like spend a couple extra dollars, few $100, or maybe around the same price to get a decent PC. And even if it isn't like even if it is like at the same or a bit weaker than the Scarlet, there's still a lot of benefits to having a PC. But that is aside from the point. I just put this in because it's a bit funny, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to it on the PC gaming crowd. I can definitely, because I've got no reason to buy an Xbox since I've got a PC just built. and it is actually just built a few days ago, and it's actually working now, which I'm very happy about. And I've got this is like a Xbox killer. It's got a 2080 and a 2700 in it, which is an 8-core processor. That's going to be it's guaranteed going to be better than what is in the Scarlett, because it's not an APU. But that is beside the point. We'll move on to Nick, who says he voted for 500. They can't do 600. I think I'll remember what happened when the PS3 first launched. So I agree. So this is pretty interesting. So Microsoft came out and said that they aren't going to do a 2-model system, at least for now, like when it launches. And that's what I thought. We'd have a 500 and a 400. But if the possibility could be that they'll just both do 500, right? They'll both do 500 USD. The PlayStation 5 and the Scarlett will both cost that much. And it might seem more reasonable because inflation and everything, and phones are really expensive. I heard that as an argument. That might be in the next few replies. Took this a while ago, so it's a bit left my head a little bit. And the next poll is how much the PS5 costs. But I'm thinking, with the information I know now, that there isn't going to be a lower tier Scarlett, essentially, we can call it that. Is that maybe the PS5 and the Scarlett will both cost 500 USD, and people will just accept it because they're both $500. The last consoles were 400, and now the new ones are 500, and they've got a lot more features, so they're justified in that cost. So that could be the thought process there. Daily poll 112. How much do you think the PS5 will cost? 11% say there isn't enough information for them to decide. 15% say it will cost 400. 42% say it will cost 500. 30% say it will cost 600. So it's pretty divided. I think it's probably around the same amount of division about the with the Scarlett. But obviously, I did the one on the Scarlett. Might as well do the PS5 too. See what people think. And we've got Bolta666 again, who says probably 450, as they don't want to go above that. The leap won't probably be as big as many think it will be. Which pretty interesting, I'd say. 450 would be a good price. So Microsoft could do 500, then Sony could do 449. I think that's how they price things. They price things 1 penny less to make it seem less expensive, which is stupid. But yeah, so it could be 449 for the PS5, 500 for the Scarlett. Who knows? We've got Buckle Mine, who says voted for not enough info because he thinks prices may vary depending on the SSD sizes. Hopefully, since they are custom fit to the console, they will offer a few different size options at launch. Which, I can agree with you, Buck. A lot of it is dependent on the SSD sizes. So, with the SSD, so they will be using a custom SSD, the one that they designed themselves, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't using a standard. Just because it's a custom SSD doesn't mean they aren't using a proprietary connection, if that makes any sense. So they could be using an M2 NVMe, which is pretty standard. The PC I have right now that I just built has a 500 gigabyte 970 EVO Samsung Pro SSD, and that's pretty fast. So, and there's the PCI 4.0. There's PCI 4.0 that's going to be supported with the 3rd gen Ryzen chips, which is the same architecture in the 3rd gen Ryzen chips, which supports PCI 4.0 for SSDs. For the M2 SSDs, which will provide a lot more bandwidth to the CPU. Is going to be in the next gen console. So it could be a PCI 4.0 SSD, and you could replace that yourself with any M2 SSD, and as long as you get a 4.0 one, you could change the size out like that. Or they could be using a proprietary connection, or it could be soldered on, which I'm not sure how I'd like it being soldered on. But hopefully what they're going to do is they'll do an M2 NVMe, and it'll use PCI 4 to get the speeds that they're talking about. And they'll have their own custom one that sort of interfaces with it to make it better or whatever. So that could be a possibility. But at this point, it's we don't know much about these consoles, and we don't really know what the SSD technology is until we get a teardown of it. That's basically how I view it. But I do think being uncertain about it because of the SSD, like that's the biggest question in terms of like the storage. Like, do we get multiple options? Is it replaceable? Those sorts of things are definitely going to influence, the price and people's buying decisions, essentially. And I think that is the end of what I've got. So that's been about 105 or 106 to 112. And I thank you guys for watching. I thank you guys for waiting this long for the episode to come out. I'm really sorry about that. This week's been a bit sort of drove me insane a bit because my PC, I had the PC for about like 10 minutes and then I didn't have it at all, and now I have it somehow, which is very, very nice. But hopefully with this new rig, I'll be able to render videos faster, so that way I won't have to wait 2.5 hours, for a video to render, which my old laptop, it's a good laptop, but it can't render too fast. But hopefully I've got a much better computer. I'll be able to render videos faster, be able to get them out a lot better to you guys. But I've been Joker the Fool. This has been Pole Review, and if you guys liked the video, then you can like it. If you did not like it, then go ahead and dislike that video. If you like what you saw, you can stick around for more, and I will see you guys in the next video. Okay, goodbye.